Welcome, dear friends, to a tale of power, passion, and unexpected romance in the high-stakes world of corporate New York. Enjoy the story. Victoria Hartley dismissed her driver and slid behind the wheel of her sleek Mercedes. The cool leather of the steering wheel was comforting under her manicured hands. Driving always helped her decompress, and today she needed that more than ever. The day had been a whirlwind of stress. The business partners her team had been courting for months suddenly backed out of signing the long-awaited contract. Her childhood friend, Samantha, had spent an hour on the phone bemoaning her useless husband and concluding that all men were selfish jerks. And to top it all off, her right-hand man, confidant, and de facto business partner, George, had handed in his resignation. "Have they all lost their minds?" Victoria muttered as she navigated through the bustling streets of New York City. At home, she took a long hot shower, hoping to wash away the day's frustrations. Exhausted, she collapsed onto her king-sized bed, praying for a deep, dreamless sleep. But just as she was drifting off, her phone lit up and vibrated on the nightstand. It was George. "Victoria, I have a proposition for you." His voice came through, uncharacteristically formal. "How would you feel about hiring a trusted colleague to take my place? My friend Andrew is an excellent lawyer." Victoria could tell by George's tone that this Andrew must be nearby. She cleared her throat and replied in her most professional voice, "Certainly, George. Please have him come to the office tomorrow for an interview." As she hung up, Victoria stared at the ceiling, its smooth surface reflecting the soft glow of the city lights filtering through her windows. "Well played, George," she murmured. "You've ensured I can't sleep now." Knowing sleep would elude her, Victoria padded to her bar and poured herself a generous measure of cognac. The amber liquid burned pleasantly as it slid down her throat, spreading warmth through her chest. Glass in hand, she stepped out onto her penthouse balcony, wrapping herself in a soft cashmere throw. The city sprawled before her, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. As she sipped her drink, Victoria's mind wandered to the challenges that lay ahead. A new lawyer to train, partners to woo back, and the ever-present pressure of being a woman at the top of her field in a man's world. "Tomorrow's another day," she sighed, finishing her cognac and heading back to bed. This time, sleep came swiftly, cradling her in its merciful embrace. The next morning, Victoria's office was a hive of activity. She answered calls briskly, simultaneously making coffee and warming up a bagel. Her housekeeper had taken the day off, so breakfast was a do-it-yourself affair. As she hurried to her office, juggling her coffee and a stack of files, she nearly collided with George and a young man she assumed must be Andrew. "Victoria, so sorry we're early," George apologized, steadying her coffee cup. "This is Andrew Olson, the lawyer I mentioned." Victoria's eyes swept over Andrew. He was younger than she'd expected, probably in his late 20s, with boyish good looks that seemed at odds with the sharp suit he wore. "Please come in," she said, gesturing to her office. Once inside, she turned to George. "George, would you mind waiting outside? I'd like to speak with Mr. Olson privately." As George left, closing the door behind him, Victoria settled behind her desk and began to review Andrew's resume. She glanced up occasionally, noting how the young man fidgeted slightly under her gaze. "Mr. Olson, your resume is impressive for someone your age," she began. "But I have to ask, how old are you exactly?" Andrew's cheeks flushed slightly. "I'm 29, Miss Hartley, but please don't let my age fool you. I may look young, but I assure you I'm more than capable." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? And what makes you think you can handle the pressures of a high-stakes corporate law position?" Andrew straightened in his chair, his blue eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "Miss Hartley, I entered university at 15. I've been called a prodigy, a wunderkind, but those labels don't matter. What matters is results, and I can deliver those. Give me a chance, and I'll prove it to you." Victoria leaned back, impressed despite herself. There was a fire in this young man, a determination that reminded her of herself at his age. "Very well, Mr. Olson," she said after a moment. "You'll start tomorrow. Don't make me regret this decision." As Andrew left, beaming with excitement, Victoria called out to her secretary. "Janet, prepare the paperwork for Mr. Olson's appointment." She had a feeling things were about to get very interesting around the office. In the weeks that followed, Andrew proved himself to be every bit as capable as he'd claimed. He quickly got up to speed on the company's affairs, streamlined their legal processes, and began drafting a new contract to win back their hesitant partners. Victoria found herself constantly surprised by the young lawyer. How did such a boyishly handsome face house such a sharp analytical mind? Every deal he touched seemed to turn to gold. Contracts were signed, lawsuits were settled with minimal damage to the company, and their business began to flourish like never before. One evening, as Victoria was reviewing some documents in her office, she caught herself daydreaming about Andrew. If he were older, or at least her age, she might have allowed herself to fall for him. But she quickly shook off the thought. Andrew clearly idolized her, but it was surely just hero worship, the way a star student might adore a teacher. Still, she couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lit up when she entered a room, or how he always seemed to have a cup of coffee ready for her, just the way she liked it. "Don't be ridiculous, Victoria," she chided herself. "He's grateful to you for giving him this opportunity. Nothing more." Little did she know, Andrew's feelings ran much deeper than she imagined. A month later, Victoria and Andrew found themselves on a train headed to Chicago for crucial negotiations. Andrew had confessed to a fear of flying, so Victoria had agreed to take the train instead. "We might as well get some sleep on the way," she joked as they boarded their private compartment. After a light dinner in the dining car, they returned to their compartment. Andrew insisted on working a bit more, while Victoria, exhausted from the day, changed into silk pajamas and curled up under a soft blanket, an audiobook playing softly in her earbuds. The gentle rocking of the train soon lulled her to sleep, the romance novel she'd been listening to forgotten. Andrew carefully removed the earbud that had slipped from her ear, placing her phone on the small shelf beside her. He couldn't sleep. The rhythmic sound of Victoria's breathing was making his heart race faster than the train's wheels on the tracks. The delicate scent of her perfume was intoxicating. His mind screamed, "Don't!" but his body seemed to move of its own accord. He gently pulled back the blanket and ran his fingers lightly along Victoria's spine, from her neck to the small of her back. Victoria stirred, turning to face him with bleary, confused eyes. "Andrew? What are you doing?" "Please don't be angry," he whispered, his voice husky with desire. "I can't hold back anymore. I'm in love with you, Victoria." Before she could respond, he leaned in and kissed her deeply, passionately. To his surprise and delight, after a moment of hesitation, she kissed him back. The next morning, rain pattered against the train windows as Victoria and Andrew sat cuddled together, sipping tea and coffee respectively. The scent of their breakfast lingered in the air as Andrew began to paint a picture of their future. "Let's leave it all behind," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "We could go somewhere tropical, somewhere without these endless winters. I've always dreamed of living in a place where it's warm year-round." Victoria frowned slightly. "But what about the company? Do you realize how many people depend on us for their livelihoods?" Andrew waved off her concerns. "That's not a problem, Victoria. We could appoint a competent manager to run things. They'd do just as good a job as we do." "I don't know," Victoria mused. "A competent manager? I barely managed to find a decent lawyer, and even he wants to run off to the tropics." She stood up, tying her robe more tightly around her waist, and stepped out into the corridor. A few other passengers were standing by the windows, peering out at the rainy landscape. Victoria suddenly felt trapped. The thought of returning to the compartment, to Andrew and his dreams of escape, made her uneasy. Yes, he was handsome, a skilled lover, and an engaging conversationalist. But was he truly in love with her? Or was this all an elaborate scheme to fulfill his dream of living in a warm country? She had no answers, only a growing sense of doubt. In the weeks following their train ride, Andrew became increasingly affectionate at the office. Every time he entered Victoria's office, he would embrace her, kiss her, and shower her with endearments. It felt suffocating, like being wrapped in the coils of a constrictor. Victoria tried to set boundaries, insisting that he maintain a professional demeanor at work. But Andrew always had a counter-argument. "Haven't you noticed that I behave perfectly when others are around?" he'd say. "When we're alone, why not enjoy each other's company? Besides, who would dare enter without your dragon of a secretary guarding the door?" The dragon in question was Janet, Victoria's fiercely loyal secretary of 15 years, who indeed guarded access to her boss with zealous efficiency. Gone was the obedient boy eager to please his boss. In his place was a man who seemed to think he had equal footing with Victoria, if not the upper hand. Every day Andrew would demand an answer to his proposal of marriage. Victoria couldn't imagine herself as his wife. The age difference alone seemed too great a hurdle. But Andrew brushed aside her objections, half-jokingly threatening to kidnap her and marry her, in the tradition of his ancestors. Victoria laughed it off, but seeing the fire in his eyes, she began to wonder if he was entirely joking. She placated him with promises that they would marry once the company was fully out of its financial crisis. Increasingly, she found herself remembering the courtship of her first husband. He had been a master of grand romantic gestures and breathtaking surprises. Of course, he had also turned out to be a scoundrel who had nearly run their joint company into the ground before filing for divorce. "I wonder," Victoria mused one day, "how Andrew would react if I truly went bankrupt. Would his undying love survive that?" The thought, once planted, began to grow. "Yes," she decided, "I need to test him. He's too smooth, too perfect. There must be a catch." Victoria set her plan in motion. She asked Janet to print a letterhead from one of their partner companies and draft a complaint. The document claimed that, according to their contract, the partners had received substandard products and were planning to return the goods through the courts. Victoria's company would allegedly have to cover the transportation costs and legal fees. Janet, experienced and discreet, didn't question why her boss needed such a fabrication, though her woman's intuition told her it had something to do with Andrew. With the perfectly forged document in hand, Victoria called Andrew to her office. Andrew arrived in Victoria's office moments later, concerned by the unusually cold tone she had used on the phone. Victoria handed him the document without a word. He quickly scanned its contents, his brow furrowing. "What does this mean?" he asked, looking up at her. "It means, my dear fiancé, that I'm ruined," Victoria replied, her voice steady. Andrew studied her face, trying to determine if this was some kind of joke, but Victoria's expression remained grave. Without invitation, Andrew sank into a chair. "Listen, this is actually wonderful news," he said, a smile spreading across his face. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wonderful? How can you say that?" "Don't you see?" Andrew leaned forward, his eyes shining. "Now there's no issue of a mesalliance. You're a bankrupt businesswoman, and I'm a promising young lawyer. We're on equal footing. Don't worry, you won't go hungry." "Andrew," Victoria snapped, her temper flaring, "don't you understand? The business I've built, my life's work, is about to crumble, and you're rejoicing?" Andrew stood up, his voice firm. "That's it. We're going to meet my parents this weekend, and tomorrow we're going to file for a marriage license." As Andrew left the office, Victoria crumpled up the fake complaint and threw it in the trash. How dare he raise his voice to her? He was barely out of college, and already he thought he could control her? "Just you wait," she thought, pacing her office. "You'll regret this, you arrogant boy genius." Saturday arrived, and with it, Andrew's car pulled up outside Victoria's apartment building. As Victoria emerged, Andrew's jaw nearly hit the floor. She was dressed in what could only be described as a cross between a hipster and a homeless person. Ripped jeans with holes at the knees, scuffed gray sneakers that looked like they'd been fished out of a dumpster, a short black crop top, and an oversized plaid shirt completed the ensemble. Her usually immaculate hair was pulled into a messy bun. "What on earth are you wearing?" Andrew asked, his eyes wide with shock. Victoria smirked. "Oh, just trying to look the part of a bankrupt businesswoman. Is there a problem?" Andrew's surprise morphed into an amused smile. "I had no idea you were such a prankster. Well, this should certainly make for an interesting introduction." As they drove to Andrew's parents' house, Victoria felt a twinge of guilt. Was she taking this too far? But her pride wouldn't let her back down now. When they arrived, Andrew asked Victoria to wait in the car while he went to prepare his parents. As she sat there, a Roma woman approached the car, tapping on the window. "Move along," Victoria said dismissively. "I don't have money for fortune-telling." But the woman persisted, fixing Victoria with an intense stare. "Don't even think about it," she said cryptically. "What?" Victoria snapped, irritated. The Roma woman's voice grew stern. "I see you're planning something foolish. You want to offend respectable people. But I'm warning you, if you insult Dr. Olson, I'll curse you. You'll suffer for the rest of your life." Victoria was taken aback. "Who are you? How do you know I'm here to meet anyone?" The woman wagged her finger. "Dr. Olson is a saint. He saved my son's life. I protect him from all harm now. I can see you might cause trouble. So I'm warning you, don't even think about it." Victoria's mind reeled. This fortune-teller clearly sensed something. Should she ask about Andrew? As if reading her mind, the woman continued. "Andrew is their miracle child, their only one. They lost so many babies before him. He's their pride and joy, such a smart, modest boy. Never did anything wrong. He's never even had a real girlfriend before you. Where did you come from anyway?" Victoria felt a wave of shame wash over her. "Oh God, what have I done? How can I show up like this in front of these kind, elderly people? And why am I setting Andrew up like this? It turns out I'm his first real relationship, and I'm acting like a complete fool." Just then, Andrew opened the car door. "Come on, they're waiting for us." Victoria reluctantly got out of the car. "Andrew, I'm so sorry. I had this stupid idea to test your intentions, to give you a sort of shock therapy. But I don't want to shock your parents. Can we please go back to my place so I can change?" Andrew's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Ah, so that's what this is about. A test, huh? And here I thought you'd lost your mind over the bankruptcy, which I'm guessing is also fake?" He chuckled. "But no, my dear. I've already told my parents you were in a play and didn't have time to change, so the show must go on." Victoria leaned in and kissed Andrew's cheek, feeling, for the first time since they'd become intimate, absolutely certain of her feelings. "I love you," she said softly, "and I always will." Hand in hand, they walked towards the house, ready to face whatever came next, together.